When I looked through a report of the most commonly asked Bible questions, I was a little surprised to find who was Cain's wife so high on the list. But in hindsight, I can see how this question would surface. Adam and Eve were the first humans, according to Genesis 2. In chapter 4, we learn that Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel, but Cain kills Abel. And then in Genesis 4:17, it says, Cain made love to his wife and she became pregnant. So, given how contentious the book of Genesis can be, it's no wonder people read this passage and wonder, where did this mysterious woman come from? Who was Cain's wife? And then Cain's child has a son, and that kid grows up and has a son. We also hear that Adam and Eve had another son named Seth, and Seth had a son. Where are all these women coming from? It's important to recognize that although Genesis speaks of history, its primary purpose is not to be a history textbook or give us trivia knowledge about the history of Earth. Like any other book of the Bible, its purpose is to tell us about God and how we fit into God's story. So we shouldn't expect it to cover every detail like a historical report would, but instead, it will focus on the details that matter for the sake of theology. That said, when I first pondered the question of Cain's wife, I asked myself if perhaps God made other people besides just Adam and Eve. But it was, just never reported in Genesis. I don't think this option works for two reasons. And first, if we take the whole Bible to be from God, there's a theological problem. Paul tells us that sin entered the world through one man, Adam. He connects that to salvation through one man, Jesus Christ. This gets weird and muddied if there were in fact other people around. Second, Acts 17:26 says quite clearly, from one man God made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. So I don't think we can look outside Adam's family to identify Cain's wife. The only answer we're left with is a simple answer, but it raises more questions. The answer is that Cain had sisters. He would have married one of his sisters. You may push back saying, well, the Bible never says that Cain had sisters. Again, Genesis is a theological book with a theological purpose. We shouldn't be too concerned if it fails to report about Cain's sisters. But in this case, it actually does. We just have to keep reading. In Genesis 4, we learn about how Adam and Eve had Cain, and that Cain married and had children. In Genesis 5:4, the story rewinds back to Adam and says that he had other sons and daughters. Curiously, there's another ancient writing called the Book of Jubilees, and it says in Jubilees 4:9 that Cain's wife was Awan, his sister. Jubilees is not scripture, but it's still an important Jewish writing that speaks of their history. So if Jubilees is right, then Cain's wife was Awan, plain and simple. What about the problem of incest? That is, the problem of having sexual relations with a close relative. Most people understand that incest is not a good idea, if for no other reason that it can cause genetic problems. Well, this would have been the only option at the time, and it's speculated that Adam and Eve's genetics would have been more pure than our genetics today, making it safer for families to have sexual relations with each other. Over time, we see marriage relations becoming more distant, like how Abraham's son, whom Sarah bore in her old age, married Abraham's brother's granddaughter. Eventually, at the proper time, God would prohibit sexual relations with one's own family in Leviticus 18. If you're curious about other stuff in Genesis, like the age of the earth, two of my older videos come to mind. One goes through 5 different views of the age of the earth from a Christian perspective, and another asks, how much should this matter? I think you'll find that we don't need to be so wound up about this as many Christians are. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.